Bob Cusack back with Mark Penn with some fresh polling data. Mark, as we always ask the first question, what's the one word that summarizes this data?
Oh, I think the one word is nothing.
Okay.
I think nothing happened. So I think it was a kind of boring political month in which very little changed. And despite the giving of a massive State of the Union speech.
Well, I want to start with State of the Union. It was a raucous speech. There was some yelling from Republicans. Analysts said that Biden baited Republicans, but so he got did get some high marks from media analysts, but he got no bump from that speech, right?
He got no bump because he wasn't designed to give him a bump. In my view, I mean, I worked on the 95 and 96 speeches of President Clinton. And basically, once we gave the 96 State of the Union, like the election was over. And 95, the year of big government, really was a major setup in 95. So nothing really happened here with the State of the Union. Perhaps Biden showed he was a little feistier, but we don't really, a little bit more able to handle a presidential race. But essentially a little window dressing there on bipartisanship, and then just a litany of Democratic programs. Didn't really cater to the left either. Didn't go woke on a number of issues. I think that he wants to keep moderate Democrats in the fold. That's all he needs to win a primary, and maybe all he needs to win a general election too.
Other news this week: Nikki Haley getting into the 2024 presidential race. And this is after she was saying last year she would not get in the race if Trump were to run. Of course, Trump is in the race. She changed her mind. What do you think of her launch? Your polling shows that she's above water, which most politicians are not. But she's also trailing Trump pretty badly at this point.
Well, first of all, let me say that the promise not to run is perhaps the most frequently broken promise in political history. Bill Clinton said he wouldn't run. Barack Obama said he wouldn't run.
True.
So I don't know, but I almost always say, if they say they're not running, they're running. Okay. So let's put that one aside. But look, I think that she's not as well known, in the country. She's the kind of candidate who benefits from an early race where she has an opportunity to get known, would have an opportunity in early primaries if she comes off as a surprise candidate. I think she had a nice bump up, a good start. People are wondering what's going on with Ron DeSantis. Ron DeSantis set back. She took some moderate Republicans, I think, from DeSantis, who's looking a little too far to the right for his own good these days. And I think that it was a reasonable launch. And you never know who really can come out of this thing, but it was well received.
Why do you think that, as you mentioned, your data show that DeSantis has slipped a little bit, and Trump has picked up a bit of steam? And you're right. I think that DeSantis's moves right now, everyone thinks he's going to run. He's courting the base, but do you think that's why he's taking a little bit of a hit?
I don't know exactly why he's taking a little bit of hit. I know nothing to really identify why Trump is a little bit stronger. Although in the Republican primary, he was about the same 46% he's been, which says he is vulnerable to a race. I think DeSantis was just weaker because some other candidates, came in and peeled off a few points from him. I do think that the DeSantis strategy is, I've got to get these Trump voters. And he's thinking to get the Trump voters, he's going to have to play more to the right base and show that they can be comfortable with him. And I think that with Trump in, that hurts him unless he's successful at doing exactly that.
Tim Scott looks like he's going to run. He may be the only senator who's running. It looks like Ted Cruz is not going to run again. Marco Rubio probably doesn't run. His numbers are marginally above water. It's kind of weird, though, where you have, Nikki Haley from South Carolina, Tim Scott from South Carolina. It used to be the rule was, that wouldn't happen. But I guess there are none of those rules anymore, because remember back in 2016, Jeb Bush ran and Marco Rubio ran, and the Bush people kind of took offense to that, and of course Bush, he crashed right after he took off.
Well, it certainly is going to be a diverse set of Trump opponents. I mean, with Nikki Haley and Tim Scott coming out. Look, Tim Scott is not as well known as in many ways Nikki Haley. It's a long way to go in presenting himself, I think, to the public and to the Republican electorate. But look, I think both of them, win or lose, I think both of them will benefit by getting in the race, getting some exposure, getting their message out. And who knows, right? This is going to be, we don't know where Trump is going to go. We don't know, and both of them too would be superb vice presidential candidates, even if they don't win the race. If they put in a good showing in the debates or in the rest of the race here, they will be number one picks in order to take either, women away from Democrats or begin to carve into the black vote.
Another big issue that everyone's watching is the debt ceiling. The numbers here show an advantage for Republicans. Republicans are basically saying to the White House and the president, please negotiate. Come to the negotiation table. 62% want the debt ceiling raised, but with constraints on spending. Do you think that, Republicans who are, outnumbered here, they only control the House, Democrats control the White House and the Senate. Do you think those numbers can stick and they can get some type of concessions from the White House?
Well, this is a real test for Kevin McCarthy. Right? Can Kevin McCarthy pull off something here, right? Or have a mess on his hands? Or is he going to be seen as caving to the Democrats and then the right is going to go hysterical at him? He's the one who has to walk through this. And Biden's on thin ice when it comes to spending. Biden would be helped by agreeing with the Democrats to some kind of future spending curbs or caps, because he is seen as an out-of-control spender, creating inflation, creating bad economic conditions, creating a 42% job approval. And you cannot win a presidential race at 42%. Cannot happen.
Your polling has consistently shown that people are tired of Donald Trump and Joe Biden, and they don't want to see that rematch, though that rematch is certainly within the realm of possibility. Do you think, Joe Manchin recently didn't rule out a presidential bid? I think the only way he would run, if he does, were to be as an independent third party. Do you think that's feasible, though? I mean, that you've got to file in all these states, and even though there's an appetite for a third party, there also has to be money behind a third party. Do you think that's realistic, even with these numbers that show, they don't want to see a rematch?
Well, I think legally and logistically, it's completely realistic, especially this early. As you recall, Ross Perot got in March, late March, and he was able to get on a lot of ballots. So I don't think the ballot blockage is going to be the problem. I think the question is, can he be appealing to the center in a way that makes him a real presidential contender? He was on his way towards getting a lot of Republican support. He then made the deal with Biden. He lost that, and did that pick up, moderate Democratic support? Well, look, he's a very smart guy. He certainly has been an independent both ways in terms of politics, and if the voters here, we asked them, who do you think is going to win the Democratic primary? They thought Biden. And who do you think is going to win the Republican primary? They thought Trump. And so it's a possibility that they both win. It's even a probability that they both win. And that is going to provide an unprecedented opening. And I think Manchin sees that. And he's, West Virginia may not be as hospitable for him as it has been. And he's, thoroughly knowledgeable on the national issues. Mm-hmm. And I think could be a very credible presidential candidate.
What do you, Biden, we keep hearing that Biden's going to run, and the State of the Union was very much a setup for re-election. He's going to be, of course, he's not going to stop talking about Medicare and Social Security, even though Republicans have taken off the table, at least for now. Do you think that if Biden doesn't run, though, let's say he has a health issue or reconsiders or whatever, what's the state of the race then on the Democratic side?
Well, obviously, Vice President Harris has an edge, but normally a vice president would be polling much higher than she's polling. She's seen primarily as a weak candidate. Look, she'd have to show that she could hold her own in a primary situation. She'll have the party machinery because Biden would have it. Well, I guess that's a little bit of a question because I don't know that she'll have the party machinery because I can't tell what the relationship is between Biden and Harris. You know, we have kind of a history here of kind of frosty president vice president relationships. I mean, Gore and Clinton didn't speak to each other when Gore ran, and you know, I don't, you know, obviously Obama really dissed on Biden considerably, and
Didn't endorse him. Yep.
and
Yep.
I don't know that Biden is really kind of paved the way here for Harris. I don't know who's going to have the machinery. I always go through Democratic history. The vice presidents always win. Mondale, Humphrey, you know, they just always win at the end of the day. So that would be a historical. So, but on the polling basis, it's a wide open race. I would expect people would get in, and she would have a tough time necessarily winning in that race.
You asked some questions on the spy balloon and these other objects that have been shot down. We don't have a lot of information as we speak on that. It's unclear what they were, but 63% thought Biden acted too slowly as far as shooting down the balloon. And what I thought was fascinating, almost 7 in 10 think that within the next 3 years, China will invade Taiwan, and that is. I think if that does happen, that is going to be the number one issue globally. What do you make of those numbers? These numbers on foreign policy for Biden are not very strong.
Well, people don't see Biden as strong enough to deal with growing potential Chinese aggression. They didn't see him as strong enough to deal with Russia. He didn't, forestall the Ukraine invasion. Right. So all the actions in the Ukraine is after the invasion because he was unable to deter it. And so the real question marks here, if he's reelected, will he be seen as able to deter the Chinese from taking over Taiwan, which most people now think is probable that they will do that. I think on the balloon, the communications have been terrible. I mean, okay, they shot down a harmless. Well, we don't know if it's harmless, but they shot down a spy balloon with all sorts of equipment. They'll get to analyze it. It was an easy one for the president to be able to be super communicative. I mean, if they did shoot down a $12 high school experiment with a $400,000 missile in Alaska, there's going to be some explaining to do. But I think the public wants the promised transparency here. Right? What's going on? What did you know? Get a military person out there with the president. Show that you're really telling the American public what's going on. Remember it isn't the Cuban Missile Crisis, but John F. Kennedy was incredibly communicative during the Cuban Missile Crisis. What was going on? Here are the pictures. Here's what we did. Here's why we have to do it. Right now, the balloon doesn't rise to that. So why create so much suspicion about something that would be so easy to clearly communicate? And why do this administration have a turtle-like reflex when it comes to issues that they can handle? They could confront that. They could convince people that they did the right thing if the president went out there and explained it all. And they should, obviously the big questions, being raised is, okay, why isn't he more aggressive about China? Is his family relations and economic relations, and his previous statements are that he views China as nothing more than an economic competitor, right? And so, remember, he also is pulling his punches deliberately because that's what his policy is.
Right, and the fact that he said that the China balloon was not a major breach, I think, is going to be repeated on the campaign trail a lot. Going back to the Trump-Biden dynamic, Nikki Haley. When she launched her presidential bid, she basically said, there should be a test for mental acuity for politicians over 75, and that doesn't only include Biden; that also includes Trump. From your polling, is that the age issue? Is that a big issue for Biden and Trump?
Age is a big issue. People think that Biden's too old. I don't think they think. I think Trump is too erotic or too, but erratic, and, and divisive. Whereas I think age is a big issue. Biden will have trouble, shaking it on the campaign trail. Having an incredibly competent vice president is an important element of a second term for somebody in his 80s. And that also brings up kind of the problem that Harris is not seen as well positioned to take over the presidency if, God forbid, anything should happen. So, age is an issue. No one handled it better than Ronald Reagan, but he was a decade younger.
Yep. Yep. It's interesting. The Biden White House seems to be in some ways rooting for Trump, and Trump was, as your polling showed, he was the biggest loser. People thought of the midterms, but sometimes Republicans have leaned into Trump, or Democrats have leaned into Trump, like in the Virginia governor's race in 2021. That didn't work, but still, even though that Biden, and that's kind of the rationale that the Biden world says, well, listen, he beat Trump, so he's really the leading candidate, and he's the only one, or maybe he's the best candidate to take on Trump. But still, he's losing. He's down 5 points in your polling. And then Harris is 10 points behind. So is this a situation where maybe, they're rooting for something, but in the end result, it could actually backfire?
Well, look, a lot of people don't want to lose their jobs. And even a Democratic administration causes a lot of people who were with the past one to lose their jobs. And so there's a lot of momentum, if you can possibly do it, for Biden to run, and a lot of institutional momentum. I don't know what would happen against Trump. Trump's numbers are a little higher now. I'm not sure why. I don't know that they will be sustainably higher, because the less you hear from Trump, the better his numbers are. And because I always say that it's Trump v. Trump, and Trump often beats himself. And so I do think that if you look at the congressional race, no matter how bad a President Biden is, fear of Trump could be enough to keep him in office. Whereas I actually think that if there's another Republican candidate who appears weaker now, they will have a pretty easy time against a president with a 42% rating.
On Medicare and Social Security, both parties have taken it off the table for this Congress. But the American people, they get it. I mean, both Social Security and Medicare are headed for insolvency, and at some point, there's going to have to be some reforms. These are not going to be easy. Congress dealt with it in the 1990s, though, and extended the life of Medicare. That was a different era. What do you think of kind of the future? Because we're in polarizing times, and it doesn't look like that's going to change. But at some point, the parties are going to have to come together and do something, or else these programs are going to go bankrupt.
Well, look, I think this is best handled in the second term of a successful president. Right? Or it could be handled if Biden decides not to run, because it's very hard to talk about Social Security reform unless it's in a non-political environment where people are going to be, honest and try to find the best policies. We tested out, putting Social Security funds in the stock market, or investing them outside of government bonds, and that interestingly failed. I was in Singapore last year. And I was amazed when Singapore made the decision to go ahead and take money and invest it. They actually fund 20% of their budget just from the annual dividends of hundreds, the tens of billions of dollars of investment that, like, this island with 6 million people have. So it was, it's a very good example about maybe we're making a mistake here, that maybe by putting more investment in the economy, that alone could really sustain Social Security, and that we're handicapping the fund, giving it like a 2% or 1% interest, or maybe higher interest, if rates are up. So that's definitely is a question here of whether people can really be convinced to do that solution, or does it just come down to taxes? But one way or another, I don't think benefits are going to be cut. The question is always, is the retirement age at the right place? Should people who are well off get it? Should in fact, and where should these taxes end? The Medicare taxes really go on all income, and Social Security taxes don't.
Any closing thoughts? Anything you're looking forward to over the next several months. We've got the debt limit showdown. We've got this interesting Republican primary race now. There's going to be more people getting in the spring. Just want to get your kind of take on all that.
Look, I think this has been a lull. This has been a lull in politics, which is why I said nothing. Not a lot happened. People are waiting here to see, what exactly happens. But I think that come this summer, this is going to be perhaps the political season of a lifetime, with the old guard fighting to keep their power against a new guard, wondering whether or not this is their time and whether or not they should challenge the old guard and whether they're successful at that. That is going to be incredibly fascinating. In my analysis, it generally is time for the new guard to win and lead America in a different direction, because I think the country is pretty tired with the old guard.
Yeah, it will be interesting, and we'll be back, of course, next month with more polling from Mark Penn. Thanks, Mark.
Thank you, Bob.